Chapter 2 Gustoweh. As he did his homework on the small dining room table, Danny listened to his mother and father talking in the kitchen. "You'll only be home for the week?" his mother's voice said. "Crew's going to Pittsburgh," his father's voice answered. "It's the Mohawk warrior tradition, Sal. You know, we men go out hunting while the women stay home and take care of the really important things." "I don't feel like being teased tonight, Rick." His mother's voice had become serious. Danny realized how much noise his pencil was making as he scratched it across the paper, page 18. He stopped writing and listened harder. But now he could no longer understand what his parents were saying. They were talking in Indian. He had never learned enough Mohawk to understand more than a word or two when people who were really fluent in the language were talking it fast. Even back in Akwesasne Mohawk School, where he used to go, people usually talked in English, except in the native culture class. His parents had always intended to send him to a school where Mohawk was spoken a lot of the time, like the Freedom School up on the res. But then they'd moved to Brooklyn. As Danny listened closely, though, he heard words that he understood. One of them was his name. His mother said it first, and then his father said it, as if he was catching on to something. They didn't say much more in Mohawk, only a few sentences. Then there was silence. "Danny," his mother called to him, "clear off the table now so we can set it for dinner." As the three of them sat together at the dining room table, Danny noticed again how broad his father was. Richard Bigtree looked as solid as a building. "Will I ever be as big as you, Dad?" he said. "I'm Wolf Clan," Richard Bigtree said. "We tend to be big people, but you might be bigger. Your mother is Bear Clan, and so that's what you are." "Why don't I belong to your clan?" Danny said. He knew the answer, but he wanted his father to keep talking. It made him feel good to hear his father's voice. Their apartment seemed so empty without it. Clan membership always comes from the mother. That is the way it always is among our Iroquois people. It goes back a long time that way. The women are the ones who hold our nations together. We have to remember that. Richard Bigtree looked across the room at his wife. "And if we don't remember it, the women make sure to remind us of it." Danny's mother made a fist and shook it at her husband as he pretended to be afraid. Danny laughed. When the dinner was over, Danny and his father went into the kitchen to do the dishes. Danny's mother had to go out to a meeting at the American Indian Community House. "Try not to wreck the place while I'm gone," she called from the door, and both Danny and his father rattled the pans as loudly as they could in response. Top of page 20. When they were done, they went into the living room. Danny's father sat in the big chair and picked up the remote control. "What'll it be?" he said. "News or outer space?" He looked down at Danny. "Dad," Danny said, "can I put on your hard hat?" Richard Bigtree put down the remote control. "Okay," he said, "but you be careful not to break it. That hard hat is real fragile." "You're teasing me, Dad. Didn't you tell me a steel beam could fall on your hard hat and it wouldn't even scratch it?" "That's right, son," Danny's father said. "Matter of fact, that's why I'm built like this. Used to be 6'5" and skinny as a stick till a steel beam fell on my head while I was wearing that hard hat. Saved my life. But I got squished right down so I look like this now. Now I'm 5'9". Danny's father patted his broad stomach. "And I'm about 5'9" tall, too." Danny laughed. His father pointed with his chin toward the hall, and Danny ran to get the hat. He put it on and walked back into the room. He could barely see out from under it. In the old days, our traditional caps, our Gustowehs, had 3 hawk feathers on them, just like those painted above the eagle on that hard hat you're wearing. "The hard hat is what our Gustowehs look like today, son," his father said. "That is the cap of a real or Iroquois man." Danny reached up and took the cap off his head. He ran his palm over the beautiful design of the eagle that his father had painted on the front of the cap. The eagle's wings were spread open wide. "That eagle there," his father said, "takes care of me. It won't let me fall when I'm up there on the iron. Danny sat again at his father's feet and put the cap down. Dad, he said, I think I need an eagle to take care of me. His father said nothing. He waited for Danny to continue. It's the kids at school, Danny said. They don't like me. They make fun of me and call me chief and a redskin, and they ask me where my headdress is and tell me to go home to my teepee. I want to kill them, especially Tyrone and Brad, top of page 22. They're really good at basketball, but they hate me. Nobody here plays lacrosse. Danny paused, not sure what he wanted to say next. Do the other boys hate you or threaten you? No, at least not yet. But when they're not making fun of me, they're just ignoring me. Everybody does that. The boys and the girls too. Nobody sits with me at lunch, and in class they only talk to me because we have to talk in our work groups. Dad, I've been here over 2 months and I don't have one friend. It's like being in a war. And everybody else is on the other side. I don't belong here. I wish we could go back home. Your mother tells me, his father said, that you sit in this chair when I'm not here. I guess that is one of the things you and I have in common. Would you like to come over here? Danny put the hard hat back on his head and leaned against his father's chair. It is hard in the 4th grade, his father said. I remember back when I was in 4th grade. I had a teacher who would beat me. Does your teacher beat you? Danny shook his head. For some reason, he couldn't say anything now, and his eyes were wet. He took the hard hat Gustoweh off his head and rubbed his eyes with the knuckles of his hand. His father began to gently pat his back. That's good that your teacher doesn't beat you. You know, when I met her at the open house in September, she asked me to come into your school sometime and talk about our form of government, about the way we Iroquois did things. Some of the schools say now that our way of governing was a model for the American Constitution. So I was thinking about doing that this week, coming into your class. But I wouldn't want to come to your class if your teacher is the one who beats you. No, Miss Mowbray is nice. She's awesome. It's the other boys. They might call you names, Dad. They might. They might listen too. Danny's father was silent for a moment, and then he took his hard hat and put it on his knee. He began to tap his fingers on the top of his hat in a 2-beat rhythm that sounded to Danny like a water drum being played for a social dance. His father cleared his throat and then spoke again. Son, he said, I know it is hard to live in a strange place, to be away from home. It's hard to be among people who don't know you, but you aren't the first person who's ever been lonely and without friends. Let me tell you a story, one of the great stories of our people. It might give you strength. It's about the man we call Hiawatha. Hiawatha, Dad? Yes, Hiawatha. Not the one in that poem by that man Longfellow, the one you said they had in one of the books in the library at school. This is the real story. You want to hear this story? Huh. Danny closed his eyes as he spoke that Mohawk word his mother had told him was to be said when one wanted to hear a story. When his father's voice spoke the old stories, he could imagine himself in a great bark lodge. He could smell the smoke from the fires, see the snow piled white and clean about the pine trees. The river flowed for him as his father spoke, and he felt at peace.